Okay, so let's look at some sites from the Old Kingdom. We got to see pictures of things, but we're going to be actually seeing more examples of what the Old Kingdom looked like. And again, we stayed in Giza and made day trips to Abu Sir, Saqqara, which you more commonly would know where the Step Pyramid is, Dashur, where the Bent Pyramid and the Red Pyramid are. And Abu Sir is where the Stargate is. And I'll mention first that our guides, and there are groups of Egyptologists who do not believe that the pyramids were constructed as tombs. They may have buried people in them later, but they had another function. There's debate about what that function was, but in part because a tomb was called a Purka, or house of the spirit, and pyramids had a different name. It was a house of the netter. You see these beautiful, this is an Old Kingdom tomb of King Unas. Beautiful decorations and a lot of text helping or giving instruction to the spirit as it's going to go into the afterlife. And you see nothing like that in the pyramids. The Step Pyramid is thought to be it is a mastaba. It was constructed as a tomb. This is the Red Pyramid, probably constructed for another purpose.
Hey, Drew, I think you have the old PowerPoint up. We don't see the new.
Yeah.
We see the wheel.
Yes,
We see the wheel.
there, oh, there, is that where we're looking there? We point to.
There we go. That looks like a red pyramid.
Yeah.
Step pyramid.
That pyramid, no,
Woo!
They look different up close, don't they?
They look like a pile of rocks.
They do,
Two different types.
yes.
One looks like an Aztec pyramid practically.
Oh, hi.
Hey, I do.
Give me a sec.
Try that again. Take it for the top.
Okay. Now we'll see. My slides were stuck, and they still are. Hold on. There we go. All right. Yes. So I was just talking about the day trips, and then you can see the inside of the tomb of Unas, and then you can see inside the Great Pyramid. No decoration. Again, the language to name these was different, so people don't feel like they were constructed as tombs. They had another function, and people may have buried themselves there later.
Hmm.
So you see the Step Pyramid, which is a mastaba, was constructed as a tomb, and I'll show you kind of the stages that it was built. This is on the right is the Red Pyramid. I'll start by showing some Old Kingdom pyramids. This is north of Giza, and I'll just show a couple of pictures of the pyramid at Abu Rawash that is called the Lost Pyramid. It began deconstruction probably around the 11th century, and or earlier. There was a sultan who took its stones and took them out, but there are descriptions by some Egyptologists from the 1800s that were saying, even the early 1900s, there was like 30 donkey carts a day taking stone off of this site. So there's really no pyramid left. There's just the what's carved out underneath it. So we walked down here. I noticed that one of my travel mates is barefoot. She's one from New Zealand. We get down there, and there was this, a big vat And I've seen some old pictures of this from the early 1900s. That's before it's kind of been looted and messed with. This was a special permission that we got into to see it, but it was kind of interesting. And as we look at the Giza Plateau, I'm sure first going to show you the Osiris shaft. Now, there are 3 pyramids in a row here. The second pyramid has a big causeway, and in the middle of it is a shaft that goes down 100 feet. And they have, what they've demonstrated is that there's actually a tunnel from that shaft that goes under the second pyramid, and there was water flowing underneath there. I think what's interesting is you can see how thick the causeway is. It's not just a road with cobblestone. It is big, huge stones that created this causeway from the Nile River to the second pyramid. So we went into this tunnel here. We first climbed down the first shaft, which was 13 feet, then 53 feet down the second shaft. And I'll show you what we found at this level, and then you could climb down. And there's looks like a sarcophagus in here, but this is actually like a lake. And as I said, that the water table had dried up in 1976. They were actually able to follow a tunnel that went all the way to the second pyramid.
Wow.
This is climbing down that first ladder. Drew does not like heights. I can do, I'm not claustrophobic, but so, you know, it was like, just don't look down. Because we had to not only climb down, of course, you had to climb back up. But once we got down there, there were these boxes that were 6 tons, 4-ton box, maybe 1 to 2 ton lids.
What were they for?
There was no soot from a torch. And what was kind of interesting is to think about how that box came down this shaft.
Oh,
And there were probably 4 or 5 of them.
Oh my gosh.
So then there was another ladder that went down to that flooded area. This is our guide Yusuf waiting around down there.
oh, gee.
When we look at the great, you know, the Great Pyramid and the other second and third pyramid, they were originally covered with a. I'll start with the third one, which we could not go inside. You see this gouge here was carved out by a sultan who wanted to take this thing down and build his own palace. And I think he gave up on construct it. But you see at the base, the original granite base cover stones. And look at the precision of how those were cut and laid.
That was planned.
This is our group.
Wow.
It's true.
Wow.
The second pyramid with its limestone casing, which used to be glistening white, and it's so polluted in Egypt that it just gets more and more brown. I went in there my first day by myself without the tour. And you go down this ramp and into the inner chamber where they've one explorer, Belzoni, had carved his or written his name, having visited in 1818. Up at the Great Pyramid, the first pyramid, this is a security guard on camel. And actually at some point he parked the camel and there were kids climbing up the pyramid. And so he got after them. It was sort of fun to watch him, like kind of horseback, but camelback. Surrounding the pyramids in some areas, there are these large pieces of crystal. And it's thought that they had like water features so that, you know, you had this beautiful white pyramid, but you also at the base surrounding it had ponds of water that were sitting on you know, on these crystal structures.
Reflection.
We went into the Great Pyramid at 4 o'clock when it closed to the public. And we would have gone in first. And so we had it all to ourselves for the most part. We went into the Queen's Chamber. Then we went up and spent time in the King's Chamber. I'll show you photos of that. A couple of us went down and then went down into the subterranean chamber, which you could walk down this far. You kind of had to crouch, but I had to crawl on my hands and knees for the last probably 20 feet. This is the Queen's Chamber. And you may have seen some National Geographic capturing muons, or their waves of particles that would penetrate. And so they would set up these film structures that would kind of like an X-ray or other chambers in the Great Pyramid. So this was the Queen's Chamber. We got to see some of the Japanese equipment, and this is what they found in terms of some voids here above the Grand Gallery, and then also a void near the entrance.
Ooh.
Look at that.
So walking up the Grand Gallery, a picture photograph cannot describe the huge, amazing, amount of stonework that went into this granite interior structure. And the acoustics in here were amazing. So on the right, you see Yusuf, our guide. We would all take turns sitting in this. I don't know if it was a sarcophagus that was added later, but it was a box, and we would get inside of it, and he would hum or say different, sing different tones. And it was pretty trippy because the reverberation was unreal. And you see Marie meditating. We came out at 6 o'clock, and this was what the outside of the Great Pyramid. So that was a pretty, life-changing thing. The Sphinx. So do you think it is 2,500 years old, which would be the 4th dynasty when it was carved? Do you think it was carved 7 to 10,000 years BCE or 50,000 years by ancient aliens? What's your guess?
I don't know.
I would guess between B and C.
I think the common literature might say 2,500, but there's so much erosion and so little rainfall that they really think it's much older. And again, as I mentioned, it was probably remodeled. This was originally a lion's face and was carved into the face of a pharaoh, but maybe even Old Kingdom.
Look at that. Wow. A great picture.
It looks so small when you put it against the pyramids, but when you're standing there, it looks so huge.
Yes, it does. Look at
And
those.
so old. I mean, just, I'll go through this quickly. South of Giza is Abu Sir. They got this special permission because we didn't have a big enough group to have the funds to go in to it. So we went in after 3 o'clock, after the guards had left with a bribe. But you can see the distance to the Great Pyramid and the Giza Plateau. And there were all these alabaster bowls that were somehow, they were ponds or, filled with water. What their function was, nobody really knows. And this is just south of there. This is considered a Stargate if you're into that kind of mystical thing, but it's all alabaster, solid, and still standing. Pretty interesting. But it would have been a place of meditation or worship or some part of a temple. To the south is Saqqara, which was a necropolis that was inhabited for thousands of years. People are buried from Old Kingdom to New. This was a hospital that's been restored. Our guide said that they did sound healing. There's some evidence that they were doing some kind of acoustical work like they do in the sort of our new age. Really neat building.
Yes.
It looks like a hospital.
And tombs everywhere. We got to go through many of them and see just the amazing. I could have 2 hours of just photos from Saqqara. Also some kind of interesting utility.
It's a cycle of life.
And a crocodile eating a fish and pretty cool stuff. This man would charge you $1. Well, he'd ask for $1 if he'd pose for your camera. I thought this was the greatest picture. And he would also stand behind this wall and he would make tea, and kind of crappy tea. He'd boil water and you could have a cup of tea. The Serapeum is an underground, I'll skip to the next slide, kind of complex. Again, no evidence of soot. I don't know how they lit or could see what they were doing to carve this out and then bring these boxes are 60 also to 100 tons. And look at the lid here. This is huge. And on the right, I think when dynamite was invented, probably in the it was been late 1860s, they put dynamite in this and tried to blow it up and it just blew a hole and it didn't even budge the lid. And they're all perfectly level. There's, I think, 22 of these gigantic boxes in there.
Do they know what's inside of them, Drew?
They were empty. And so, the conspiracy theorists think that they were filled with radioactive material. They were built to house bowls, a bowl that would have been mummified and, was in some sort of prayer to the bull god.
All makes sense.
Did at the time.
Oh, wow.
This is now open to the public. It wasn't when we were there. In fact, Mark Leonard was also doing some tour with his group. And here you can see the original step pyramid that was built by King Djoser in the Old Kingdom, but it's been added on to. And in fact, they think that there are bodies probably placed in these different layers. We went into the central shaft here and we walked, it's a big, huge scaffold. It's about 4 stories. Walking down these stairs and then to the end, we then would have climbed down a ladder to see his sarcophagus. And we got to kind of play around in this maze of galleries down at that lower level. But then we traveled down this wood ladder and grabbed a rope and had to transfer over to another side of the wall to another ladder to go down 2 more levels. That is obviously not open to the public.
Good God.
Wow. OSHA would not allow that.
No, and coming back up was also interesting because you had to pull yourself up on the rope. I'm not really good with heights, so but down there was a whole maze of galleries down below, and we found this alabaster box. It had drill holes in it. It was translucent. There's another photo where Yusuf is shining his light through the box, but apparently there have been other artifacts found down there. Of course, they're in a museum somewhere.
Wow.
And emerging from underneath the step pyramid, 6 levels down, I have never been so filthy in my life. I was covered with dirt and dust, but it was a fun adventure. Going south to Dashur, the Red Pyramid was probably one of my favorite highlights of the trip. It's not as big as the Great Pyramid, but the interior chambers are just this, and the acoustics in here are just amazing. This is all granite. And we crawled through another tunnel that went into this other chamber that had a big vat in it. It was interesting. It smelled like sulfuric acid. The bent pyramid, engineers think was a mistake. The ancient Egyptians were experimenting with one angle and switched because they thought it was going to fall down. Our guide said it was built that way on purpose, and you can still see the limestone facing here, which has been discolored, but that whole corner came off probably from an earthquake. And here you can see the limestone, how thick it was.
Wow.
Oh,
I would not stand under that.
I would not stand under that either.
And how precise the cut was as well, and the fit. Amazing.
well, how did they build that? Do you know how they built that?
Very carefully.
I'm gonna go down to Abydos, and this is the end of the Old Kingdom, where we're gonna see the Osirian temple. And again, these huge blocks. There are these ponds, and they're actually, you see algae in them. They're filled with fish. And there are underwater channels and tunnels. They were transporting water from one place to another. So it's thought that this was a water temple. But you look at not only the size of this block, but how they laid the ceiling stones as well.
Wow.
And they're not sure if this was built underground or if it was just buried, and then of course they have excavated it, but it's below the surface of the ground, and you can see us standing
Sewer system.
as a group. Now, if you were to go down this tunnel and into this place here, there's this whole hallway to the rear of it, might have been added on. And in this hall, there is illustrations of the entire Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Oh, wow.
So I took probably 50 pictures of just one after the other. I don't need to show them, but you can see an example here. Impressive. And the Flower of Life impression is here at the Osirian.
That seems out of place.
Well, and they think it may have been carved later, like more like Byzantine.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's very teeny.
So sitting in front of the Osirian is another temple that is obviously much newer. It's a temple of Seti, built by Ramses, who would have been, I think in a different dynasty, but probably the next 2 generations after King Tut and Akhenaten. So this is a little bit newer, really neat looking temple. And the public could have gone into the outer areas of this temple, but only the priests and the pharaoh could have gone to the interior. So this is actually a map of cartouches of every pharaoh in Egyptian history, with the exception of they didn't include Akhenaten or Tut, were omitted. But when we look at records of all of the pharaohs, this is one of them that's carved in stone. I think there's others on papyrus as well, but fascinating to see how they recorded their own history of their kings. The Coptics would have occupied this temple in the early Roman times. And so as they occupied it, they would have also had campfires or they were cooking, having fires to stay warm and so forth. And so they've got major restoration work to remove all of this soot off of the ceiling.
Wow.
And it's in this temple that you may have seen on television, the helicopter, the boat, and the submarine. Now, I've seen these in glyphs, and so there's dispute about whether those were ancient alien technology or if they're just glyphs, but that's where they're located. This is sitting up on a beam on a ceiling. And the outer hall is just beautiful.
Wow.
And the inside, as you progressed inward, you would have gone through, I think there's 7 chapels that are dedicated to different deities. So Also in the New Kingdom, we know you've all heard of Akhenaten. He was thought to be a heretic because he changed the religion to monotheism, to worship the sun god. And in reality, he probably common people didn't even know that there was any shift in the religion. What he was doing was taking away the power from some of the priests, sects, and cults that he thought had too much power. And so by creating monotheism, he could shut them down because each group was dedicated to a different deity, and they probably would have been gods by then. So you recognize his kind of curvy hips and interesting looking face. And so this is Akhenaten worshiping the sun god. So he shut down the capital of Thebes and moved and built a new capital in El Armana. And once he died, they tore that down. What's also interesting is that it's so far from the Nile River, they would have had to drug all the stone to build this city for miles. So we climbed up this hill where there's probably the last remaining stela. This is he and Queen Nefertiti. And then this would have been a stela marking the boundary of El Armana. Just some ruins to the south. So going south then, Karnak would have been Middle Kingdom. It was rebuilt and remodeled by every pharaoh. So they would demolish old stuff and rebuild it. It was kind of interesting. We went to the Valley of the Kings. We weren't supposed to, but we went into some tombs there, which are just simply amazing. I did not get to go into Tut's tomb, and I want to go back and do that. The Colossi of Memni, these statues were originally one solid piece when they were carved. And I think this is Ramses II and his queen. We had the option to do a balloon ride down the Nile Valley from Luxor. And so we crossed the Nile on a little boat and got into a van and got into these balloons at 4 o'clock in the morning as the sun was rising, and we floated down the Nile. You can see sort of the border of where the Nile River is irrigating croplands versus what's basically desert. But we got to fly over so many ruins, and it was a pretty amazing trip. Between Luxor Temple and Karnak Temple is the largest temple in the world, is about 1.5 mile avenue of sphinxes. That's just open to the public this fall. It was restored, but just that's what it's lined with between the two temples. These mini sphinxes that are lions with human heads. This particular chapel is sitting in what they call an open air museum. It was originally a solid block of alabaster that they would have brought to this site. It was later demolished, and the rubble was used in constructing something by a future pharaoh, and so they have reconstructed it. So, but it's amazing to me that this was one solid piece that they drug down here from the north.
Wow. It's very beautiful.
You see some evidence of fertility, but the beautiful relief carving of this temple is amazing. And then finally, we left Karnak and Luxor and got on our
So, yeah, it's-
Hmm.